And welcome to today's video. This is a B1 level lesson, and we're going to start learning about the passive voice in both the present simple and the past simple. So what do you know about art? Do you know any famous paintings or painters? Um, what is your favorite painting? Which famous painters do you know? And who is the most famous painter from your country? And then what do you know about these works of art? Which artist created it? When was it created? And do you know anything about the artist or the artwork? All right, we're going to read about one of the most famous paintings in European art. You can pause the video and read on your own, or you can follow along as I read. Diego Velázquez was the most famous painter in Renaissance Spain. Many of his paintings were portraits of the Spanish royal family. One of his best-known works is Las Meninas. Las Meninas was painted in 1656. It is widely considered as one of the most important paintings in Western art history. And in Europe, the Renaissance is the period between the 14th and 17th centuries. During this time, there were many changes in art and literature. So, what do you think of this painting? What's your opinion of it? All right, so now match each person to his name and field of work if you can. You can pause the video, try that on your own, and then restart when you're ready to check the answers. All right, so A is Arcangelo Corelli, and his area is music. B is Wolfgang, I'll change colors for each of these. Oops. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and he is also music. Then we have Shakespeare, and he is literature. C is Matsubasho, and he's literature. And E is Gian Lorenzo Bernini, and he is sculpture. All right, so now we're going to read about the Italian sculptor and answer the questions. Again, you can pause the video and read on your own or follow along as I read. So David is a life-size marble sculpture which was created by the Italian Gian Lorenzo Bernini. It was completed in 1624. It represents David from the biblical story of David and Goliath. David is about to throw the stone which will hit Goliath in the forehead. And a biblical story is a story from the Bible. For which people is this an important book? That would be people that follow the Christian religion. And do you know the story of David and Goliath? Well, here this picture kind of represents it. David was a young shepherd boy. Goliath was a giant, and David's people were fighting. He was a soldier of the Philistine army, and David's people were fighting the Philistines. Goliath came out and challenged, made a challenge, and the other soldiers were afraid, but David went out with just his stone and slingshot and ended up defeating Goliath. All right, now we're going to read about Shakespeare, one of the most famous writers of all time. Early in the 17th century, the English writer Shakespeare wrote a number of his best-known tragedies. Macbeth, the story of a Scottish general, was first performed in 1606. Many people believe that the play is cursed. They believe that saying Macbeth inside a theater will cause disaster. A curse is a wish that something bad would happen to someone. Today, most people don't believe in curses. So, who is the most famous writer in your language? Do you ever go to the theater? And do you like to watch plays? All right, now we're going to talk about the order of words in a sentence. So let's look at how we usually make a sentence in English. In these sentences, there is a subject plus a verb plus an object. So Shakespeare wrote Macbeth. Velázquez created paintings. My mother made a cake. The subject completes the action and the object receives the action of the verb. Right, so now find the subject, verb, and object for each sentence. She did her homework, so she is the subject. Did is the verb. Homework is the object. We watched the film. We is the subject. Watched is the verb. Film is the object. Sally hit the ball. Sally is the subject. Hit is the verb. Ball is the object. Some people built the house in 1784. People is the subject. Built is the verb. And house is the object. Gustav Eiffel designed the Eiffel Tower. So Gustav Eiffel is the subject. Designed is the verb. And Eiffel Tower is the object. All right, the passive voice. We can write sentences using the passive voice. In the passive voice, the object comes at the beginning of the sentence. So look at these sentences in the active and passive voices. Velázquez created Las Meninas. Velázquez created the painting. So here, Velázquez is the subject, and Las Meninas, or the painting, is the object. When we show the subject in a passive sentence, we reduce it with the word by. So Las Meninas was created by Velázquez. The painting was created by Velázquez, or it was painted by Velázquez. So in these sentences, Las Meninas, the painting, and it are the subjects, and here Velázquez is the object. And why do we use the passive voice? Well, in English, the most important information comes at the beginning of the sentence. So in these sentences, we focus on the subject of the verb. Shakespeare wrote Hamlet at the beginning of the 17th century. The ancient Egyptians built the pyramids more than 3,500 years ago. Some people built the Colosseum almost 2,000 years ago. So in these next sentences, we focus on the object of the verb. We move the object to the start of the sentence and use the passive voice. So Hamlet was written by Shakespeare at the beginning of the 17th century. The pyramids were built by the ancient Egyptians more than 3,500 years ago. The Colosseum was built almost 2,000 years ago. And why didn't we finish this last sentence with by some people? Well, it's really not necessary. I mean, you can kind of assume that people do the building, so it really doesn't need, it doesn't need the by some people. All right, and when do we use the passive voice? We use the passive voice for several reasons. We often use the passive voice when we don't know who or what did the action. So the Colosseum was built almost 2,000 years ago. So we don't know specifically who built the Colosseum. It was built by people, but we don't really know what specific people, and that's really not important to the meaning of the sentence. What we're really focusing on is how long ago the Colosseum was built. We also use the passive voice when who or what of the action is not important. The palace was completed in 1682. Again, we're focusing on when the palace was completed, and we don't really care about who built the palace. We often use the passive voice when we introduce new or important information. the new information is usually about who or what. So the thinker is a famous sculpture. Rodin created it in 1880. The thinker is a famous sculpture. It was created by Rodin in 1880. So here we know that the it refers to the sculpture, and we want to focus on that without having to repeat the the name of the sculpture again. All right, to form the passive voice, we use be plus the past participle to form the passive tenses. So here are both the positive and the negative. I am driven to work every day. I'm not driven to work every day. We are driven to work each day. We aren't driven to work each day. He is driven to work each day. He isn't driven to work each day. And in the past tense, we just use the past simple form of to be plus the past participle. I was driven to work every day. I wasn't driven to work every day. We were driven to work each day. We weren't driven to work each day. He was driven to work each day. He wasn't driven to work each day. All right, so now you're going to just skim the text and find the two verbs that are in the passive voice. And the hint here is to look for the past participle. When you find one, check for a form of be in front of it, and that could indicate the passive voice. So again, you're just going to skim. You're not going to read it closely. Pause the video and do that on your own, and then restart the video when you're ready to check. Okay, so here, was performed is the passive voice. Let's see. Since there's a second one, let's check that. Oh, is known. So we've got is known, and the music was performed. Okay, and in both sentences with the passive verb, the subject is not mentioned, and why, and is this information is important. Well, here we already know that we're talking about Arcangelo Corelli, so we need to focus on the second part of the sentence. And then here, his music was performed throughout Europe. We don't know who performed it, so that's why we can use the passive voice in this sentence. All right, so you're going to change each sentence into the passive past simple and introduce the subject with by. And here's an example. The dog bit the boy was bitten by the dog. So you can pause the video, try these on your own, and then restart when you're ready to check your answers. Okay, so number one, the police officer rescued the elderly woman. So the elderly woman was rescued by the police officer. The children ate the cake would be the cake was eaten by the children. The courier delivered the letter. That would be the letter was delivered by the courier. The ambulance took the sick man to the hospital. The sick man was taken to the, taken to the hospital by the ambulance. My grandfather built this house in 1948. So this house was built by my grandfather in 1948. A famous writer wrote this book, or famous author, sorry, a famous author wrote this book. So this book was written by a famous author. Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. Would be the Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. And Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women. So Little Women was written by Louisa May Alcott. All right, so what does the student need to know? So complete the sentences with words from the boxes. You can, again, pause the video, try this on your own, and then restart when you're ready to check your answers. Matsuo Basho was a 17th century Japanese poet. He is considered a master of the haiku, a type of very short poem. One of his best-known literary works describing a frog jumping into water was written in 1686. Pachelbel's canon was composed by Johann Pachelbel in the late 17th century. For the next 200 years, it was virtually forgotten. In the last 50 years, it has become very popular again, and these days, it is heard at weddings in the Western world. All right, so now rewrite each of these sentences into the passive voice and remember to introduce the subject of the sentence with by. So Charles Dickens wrote Great Expectations would become Great Expectations. Was written by Charles Dickens. Norman Foster designed the Malau Aqueduct. The Malau, viaduct, not aqueduct, the Malau Viaduct was designed by Norman Foster. Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley wrote Frankenstein. So Frankenstein was written by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. And Beethoven composed the Ninth Symphony. The Ninth Symphony was composed by Beethoven. All right, so this is some additional practice with the passive voice. Rewrite each sentence in the passive voice, but do not mention the subject because it is not important. So that means you won't need the by, whoever, because the subject isn't important. Go ahead and try those on your own and then restart when you're ready to check your answers. So people invented the wheel around 3,500 BCE. So the wheel was invented around 3,500 BCE. Someone delivers the mail to my house every day. So the mail is delivered to my house every day. People built the Great Wall of China almost 400 years ago. So the Great Wall of China was built almost 400 years ago. People constructed Hagia Sophia in 573 CE. So Hagia Sophia was constructed in 537 CE. People speak French in Belgium. So French is spoken in Belgium. Hans Lippershey invented the telescope in the 17th century. So the telescope was invented in the 17th century. And remember, we're not mentioning the subject because we've been told it's not important. Sheep produce a lot of wool in Australia. So a lot of wool is produced in Australia. All right, so now answer these questions and try to use the passive voice. What is your favorite song and who sings it? What is your favorite book and who wrote it? What is your favorite movie and who directed it? What is your favorite building and who designed it? And what is your favorite work of art and who created it? And that brings us to the end of today's video. Please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.